At the end of the Ediacaran era, the Earth was hit yet again with a glaciation. If you were a soft-bodied animal with non-light-sensing organs, you would not survive. And as the glaciers started to melt, the oxygen levels started to increase, and the erosion from the glaciers caused an increase in minerals in the ocean. We are now in the Phanerozoic Eon, the final eon we will cover in Evolving Planet. We also entered the Paleozoic era, the first era of Evolving Planet. And of course, we are now in the Cambrian period, a time period that started 541 million years ago. And in the Cambrian, we start to see complex food webs arise. Welcome to a world of water. The start of the Cambrian, many open niches were available for life to take. And as these niches started to be filled, the soft-bodied filter feeder niche wouldn't be an option. This is because animals have started to hunt other animals. This caused animals to evolve traits that would help them better survive. One of those traits would be the presence of sight. At first, this evolved because if animals wanted to find sunlight in warm areas in an ice-filled world during the end of the Ediacaran, they had to have basic light-sensing organs. And when these animals entered the Cambrian, they had a better chance to see other animals, whether that be to hunt prey or to avoid predators. This trait also didn't come from a common ancestor. Rather, it evolved independently. This is called convergent evolution, or an adaptation that helps an animal survive shows up in multiple organisms independently. Convergent evolution will appear a lot in Evolving Planet. Also around the early Cambrian, animals would evolve two basic body plans that would be the blueprint for most living animals today. One would have a hard exoskeleton that would help to protect themselves against predators, and this body plan would be the base for all invertebrates, which included animals like arthropods. Another group would evolve to have a fleshy outside but flexible back to allow greater maneuverability. This would be the basic body plan for all later vertebrates. These basic body plans, the evolution of basic eyes, an increase in predation, and an increase in oxygen and minerals led to an explosion of life never seen before. As animals started hunting each other, new body plans would evolve which caused large adaptive radiation. This would be known as the Cambrian explosion, and this new burst in life would lead to most modern animal groups having their first appearance. It is now the later Cambrian, 508 million years ago. We are now in an area known as the Burgess Shale. The animals we will see here will be an insight into the effects of the Cambrian explosion. So let's observe some of the weird and wondrous creatures of the Cambrian. Already, we can spot familiar faces. This can include animals like corals and sponges. You can also find photosynthetic seaweed. And even if some organisms look odd, you can still find some of them and their relatives today. Take this organism, Goggia. It belongs to the phylum Echinodermata. They are mainly characterized by their hard and prickly skeletons, and their bodies being divided into 5 symmetrical parts. Its modern relatives include starfish and sea urchins. These are brachiopods. Although they may look like clams, they are actually part of their own phylum, called Brachiopoda. They are characterized by their shelly outside and feather-like structures that they use to capture particles in the water. They still exist in similar forms today. I could keep analyzing all these creatures like the stinging jellyfish relative Cnidarians and sponge-like poriforms, but they are just one of many important parts of the Burgess Shale ecosystem. These are Scanella. They are very small mollusks, which today include animals like snails, clams, and squid, and they measure at about 10 millimeters. Scanella looks like a pretty average mollusk, but another mollusk from the Burgess Shale, called Wiwaxia, doesn't look like any modern mollusk today. Wiwaxia measures at about 5 centimeters long, and it slowly collects dead matter across the ocean floor. And its standout characteristic is its spiky back and scaly shell. The thing about Wiwaxia, though, is that we aren't really sure about whether or not it is a mollusk. It could also be an annelid, which today include worms. Wiwaxia and Scanella are part of a group in the Cambrian known as the small shelly fauna. This also includes one of the most famous and diverse prehistoric animals, the trilobite. Trilobites are some of the most diverse extinct creatures to date, with over 20,000 documented species, and they got their start way back in the Cambrian. They get their nutrients by moving across the seafloor, finding dead organic material to eat. Already during the Cambrian, you can find a variety of different kinds of trilobites, all with different shapes and sizes. Some evolved eye stalks to better see. Some can even roll up into balls to protect themselves from predators. Trilobites are part of the phylum called Arthropoda, and there are plenty of other, even weirder arthropods in the Burgess Shale. This organism is called Odaria. It's 15 centimeters long, and it looks like a weird cross between an insect and a fish, but it's more closely related to the insects, being an arthropod. Marella is by far the most common animal in the Burgess Shale. It comprises about 7% of all observed species and around 25,000 specimens found. At about 2 centimeters long, Marella's flexible body comprises of 25 segments and 50 flexible feathery legs that double as gills for breathing. And then there's animals like Hallucigenia. Hallucigenia belong to a pretty obscure phylum known as Labapodia. At about 2.5 centimeters long, Hallucigenia was a worm-like creature that is confusing in many ways. Scientists originally thought that it used its spines on its back to walk around, but then realized that they were just looking at it upside down. We aren't really even sure what it ate, just that it used its mouth as a sort of suction mechanism to suck up food. Surprisingly, Hallucigenia's closest modern-day relative is a velvet worm, a type of organism that isn't closely related to true worms. The animals I've covered so far have been pretty passive feeders, primarily eating waste, algae, and whatever particles they can come across in the water. But a good ecosystem requires active predators, and the Burgess Shale has quite a few of them. At about 8 centimeters, this creature is called Otoya. It is part of the phylum Annelioidea, which today includes worms. It hunts by digging burrows and attacking rapidly at its victims. It's thought that these worms, just by burrowing, completely changed the sea floor by changing it from a mat of bacteria to the soft sediment sand we know of today. These worms, though, were not the apex predators of their ecosystem. We still have even more dangerous and weirder predators to come. This is Opabimia, the five-eyed freak of the Cambrian. This animal is 6.5 centimeters long and is one of the weirdest prehistoric animals ever discovered. It hunts using its trunk-like proboscis along with its 360 vision to find prey. Opabimia was a top predator arthropod, but it still wasn't an apex predator. This is Anomalocaris, Earth's first apex predator. The creatures we've covered so far have gotten around 10 centimeters at most, but Anomalocaris was an entire meter. It's also an arthropod, and it bears a striking resemblance to a modern-day crab or lobster. Along with its size, Anomalocaris is thought to have one of the best eyesights in the Cambrian. That, paired along with its pincers on its mouth, made it a deadly force. Anomalocaris was the unbeknownst king of the Cambrian, having no active predators, which is the definition of an apex predator. Though, of all of these weird and wondrous creatures, to us vertebrates, one would be the most important. Meet one of the first chordates, Pikaia. At about 5 centimeters, Pikaia had a pretty basic body plan. Unlike most of the other animals in the Cambrian, Pikaia had a fleshy outside with a cord running down its back. That would be the central nervous system for the animal. Pikaia's body plan may have also allowed it to be more maneuverable and escape predators easier. It's thought that Pikaia either fed by using its small mouth to tear off little bits of flesh out of animals, or to filter feed small particles in the water. It's worth noting that Pikaia is not the direct ancestor to all modern vertebrates, rather a close relative or precursor to that ancestor. Pikaia, although simple, is a large landmark in vertebrate evolution and will become the base for many other creatures to come. The Cambrian, and by extent the Burgess Shale Formation, were truly a sight to behold. They held so many wondrous animals and served as the stepping stone for most future animal groups. But as we approach the end of the Cambrian, the fate of some of these animals would have to be seen. At the end of the Cambrian, around 485 million years ago, there would be a large drop in biodiversity. We aren't very sure why it happened, as it either could have been caused by an increase in volcanic activity, more glaciers at the poles, or fluctuations in the oxygen levels. Whatever the cause was, we know what animals were affected by it. Animals like Anomalocaris would fall from their place as apex predator. Oddballs like Hallucigenia and Opabimia would disappear, and many other weird critters would not make it out of the Cambrian. This was not a mass extinction, though. The creatures that did survive, though, would dictate how life would look in the future. During a lot of the Paleozoic, the continents seemed to form around the bottom half of the equator. This led to the formation of a continent known as Gondwana, which is made up of Africa, South America, Australia, and Antarctica. And off its coast, we can find the product of a diversification of life, similar to that of the Cambrian, the Great Ordovician biodiversification event. Already, during the early Ordovician, we can see many changes in the seascape compared to the Cambrian. New animals have evolved, and old ones have started to diversify more. One of those groups is the echinoderms. In the Cambrian, there were only a very few species of echinoderm, and many of them weren't very recognizable. In the Ordovician, we can find some of the first sea stars. These curious creatures lived by slowly moving across the seafloor to find clams, mussels, and oysters to eat. Lucky for the sea star, many types of bivalves like clams and mussels have diversified greatly in the Ordovician period. Other types of echinoderms that have diversified greatly during the Ordovician include crinoids, which are filter feeders with long stems and feather-like appendages at its top that catch microorganisms floating by, and brittle stars, which resemble sea stars but with much longer and slender limbs. They feed on primarily algae, plants, and microorganisms. Besides echinoderms, we can also find a large increase in brachiopods, the filter feeder clam lookalike that we first got introduced to in the Cambrian. Another group we can find an increase in are corals and various types of sponges. We can clearly see a large diversity in these simple animals in the appearance of familiar ones, but what we can also see is an increase in arthropods, and specifically trilobites. Trilobites have been thriving during the Ordovician and have been diversifying and experimenting with many different shapes and sizes. This can include spikes, different types of eyes, and tails. Mollusks have also greatly increased during the Ordovician. Gastropods, which include snails, have gotten bigger and more prevalent since the Cambrian. Another class of mollusks, the cephalopods, have also become more prevalent. The group in particular that became abundant during the Ordovician are the nautiloids. These cephalopods are characterized by their various shaped shells. This nautiloid, called Camarasaurus, eats mollusks and smaller arthropods. It's pretty clear that the Ordovician was an invertebrate-ruled world, but the chordates from the Cambrian have been evolving, and in the Ordovician, you can find some of the first vertebrates and fish. This is Arundaspis. At 15 centimeters long, it's a species of jawless fish. During the Ordovician, fish had not yet evolved jaws, so they got their food by filter feeding particles and finding worms and small animals on the seafloor. Arundaspis also did not have any fins, and simply moved like a tadpole. Arundaspis also had an armored body and head to protect itself from predators. Armor on a fish may seem weird today, but during the Ordovician, it was a successful body plan. This This is Arundaspis' larger relative, Sacambaspis. It's 25 centimeters long and has the same general body plan as Arundaspis. Its standout characteristic is its small facial features that sort of resembles a surprised expression. This seabed has relatively little active predators. The most you'd have to look out for is Camarasaurus. The open ocean, though, is a different story. The fish's instincts say that they should stay near its home, but the fish's mind says that there might be food out there. Its thoughts get the better of them, and they embark. This animal may look different at first, but it's actually quite familiar. It's a relative of Anomalocaris, the apex predator of the Cambrian. Meet Agirocassis, and unlike its active predator relative, Agirocassis is a gentle filter feeder. After it lost its place as apex predator, the next best way to survive was through filter feeding. Agirocassis is actually larger than Anomalocaris. At 2.1 meters, it's one of the first known giant filter feeders. Though, of course, when an apex predator falls from its throne, there's always other animals willing to take its place. Meet Endoceras, the 5-meter-long cephalopod. It's related to Camarasaurus, but a lot larger. It is by far the largest predator we've covered so far in Evolving Planet. Endoceras existed across the globe and were the rulers of the ocean. As we move further through the Ordovician, we start to see more organisms evolve. Most notably, we start to see the first Eurypterids. Eurypterids are arthropods that, although related to modern-day scorpions, are not technically true scorpions. This species, Megalograptus, measures at about 1.2 meters and is characterized by its large pincers for grabbing prey. In response to these new predators, new species of jawless armored fish evolved. This species is called Astraspis, and it measures at about 20 centimeters. Up until the Ordovician, there wasn't much life on land. The most you would get is the occasional mat of cyanobacteria by the coasts. But around the middle Ordovician, we start to see some of the first non-vascular plants. These plants most likely evolved from photosynthetic algae. They have no roots, stems, or leaves, and grow from spores. But these plants are the pioneers for all future trees, ferns, and flowers, and may soon give a reason for life to go onto land. Life was going well until the end of the Ordovician. Ocean ecosystems continued to diversify, life on land started to bloom, and our ancestors kept evolving into new forms. There was absolutely nothing that could stop life from... A mass extinction event is defined by a sharp decrease in life that wipes out around 70% or more species. This is the first notable mass extinction in an evolving planet, and there are still a few more to come. So what caused the Ordovician mass extinction event, and who was affected? Well, at first, it started off with rounds of glaciations at the poles, which lowered the ocean temperature and sea levels, which caused shallow ecosystems like the one we covered to largely disappear. But then, the Earth completely switched to a hothouse, which caused low oxygen levels in the ocean. And as we know, low oxygen levels cause a rise in cyanobacteria. These events caused 85% of all species to die out. It affected various groups like trilobites, brachiopods, echinoderms, corals, bivalves, and certain vertebrates. The cephalopods too were heavily affected, with many of the large nautiloids losing their place as apex predators. This extinction event is the technically second worst mass extinction in the history of the Earth, and life wouldn't make a quick recovery from the extinction either. But when life did recover, vertebrates would be one of the first, and as we enter the Silurian period, the vertebrates would have to change their body plan. To survive in an arthropod world, they'll have to evolve to fight back.